performance and recovery. So first and foremost is we have many variables that can affect nutrition outcomes. So I'm going to start off with goals. I don't know about you, but I have my own business. Being a sports dietitian nowadays takes an average of 7 to 9 years before you can become a CSSD. And when people call and say, hey, I don't know if you could work with me, or these are what I'm looking for, the first thing I stop them and I say, well, tell me what your overall goals are. And then when they schedule and they come in, the first thing that we do is I say, I know maybe we spoke on the phone, but please reiterate your goals, your objectives, from what do you want to accomplish nutrition-wise, what do you want to accomplish performance-wise, and then break that down into short-term and long-term goals. Because if you don't know what the goal is, then how are you going to be able to better service your client base? But as you can see, I think most of us, it comes down to fat loss, gaining muscle, maybe a combination, performance outcomes, and then depending on your client base, maybe it's standing upright when they're 70, or getting, not going on medicines, or decreasing medicines that they're on. So I just want to take this moment real fast. Can some of you raise your hand if you're working mainly with athletes? Okay, is the rest of you working with like an adult population in a personal training realm? Anybody different in who you're working with besides those two? Okay. So I'll try to focus that. Now, we got our goals. The second is gene testing. I put genes second because nutrition can't change genes. So now, no matter what I do, whatever macros I would do, you cannot change genes. We actually are now using a service that tests 43 genes on nutrition. And if I try to push people to do that, but obviously there's a bigger fee. You guys, this is not 23andMe finding which area or region you are coming from. Some people, they've done a very good job at marketing that. But just to let you know, actually some of us have a gene that doesn't process starch well. Some of us have a gene that we shouldn't go over 10% saturated fat. There is actually a gene for gluten, and there is an actual gene for lactose. So there's definitely, I said there's 43 of them. I'm not going to go through each one. But I just wanted to say, if we know their genetic background a little bit better, then we know how to better help them. And it's just going to keep growing more and more on which genes they can recognize to help each person individually. Third is medical conditions, sensitivities, intolerance, allergies. We probably can list more on this list, but because the majority of you work with an older population, please don't exclude that your athletes don't have any of these issues. This is a common mistake that a lot of my people make. Because you're 16, there's no way you could have one of these issues, and that's definitely false. But the purpose on this slide is not for you to fix these. Your goal is to know the signs and symptoms, because they actually affect those outcomes that you're trying to accomplish with your client base. So some of the most common ones is adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is when your cortisol levels are running too low. The biggest signs on that is you're looking for people who say, gosh, I'm just so tired all the time, and they're getting enough sleep, okay? And maybe they crave salty snacks. That's another side effect of, adrenal fatigue. Now, here's the thing, what can cause that? So other things to listen to is extreme stress, extreme chronic situations. It could be, I had somebody who had 3 deaths in their family within 3 months. I would call that some pretty heavy chronic stress. It could be chronic as far as multiple issues with health. They had bronchitis, and now they have pneumonia, or they're on their 3rd dose of antibiotics. That's something to look for. So look for those scenarios that might lead to adrenal fatigue. Now, there is something called adrenal insufficiency, and that is actually where the body cannot produce enough cortisol. So again, that is definitely medical. So there's a difference between adrenal fatigue and adrenal insufficiency. Next is allergies, which I think most of us are pretty aware of those, but the biggest one on this is GI distress. That allergies, it's not always a rash, it's not always itchiness or numbness in the mouth. It actually can cause GI issues, and they might not relate an allergy with a GI issue, okay? Sometimes more aches and pains in the joints. So just again, where would this affect you is a lot of times it creates weight resistance, weight loss resistance, losing fat. And if you look at the commonalities, I don't know about you, but people who love coffee, I would hate, some people would hate it if they had an allergy to coffee. But other things that are hard to recognize is pesticide residues and food additives, okay? I actually had a client who said, for instance, they couldn't eat strawberries because they had a tingling in their mouth, and I said, well, can you eat frozen strawberries? And they kind of looked at me funny, and they said, and so they actually tried it, and they didn't have the same side effect. So when that produce is frozen, they actually clean it off really well. So it was probably a pesticide residue on that fruit than something else. So sometimes we, just asking questions, we can derive it really, is it the food, or is it something on the food, or is it an additive that they've included with that food? Next is pancreas function. Pancreas function, your pancreas is located in the abdomen. Its main function is to take fuel or take our food and convert it to fuel for our body. It does two main functions. It has an exocrine function of food digestion, and it has an endocrine function of, obviously, it regulates blood sugar. So a couple of factors on this is extreme weight loss, or they have weight gain, and water retention. So just looking for those. Another one that you've probably heard a lot of is leaky gut syndrome. So in general, when we eat something, it goes through our esophagus, it goes to our stomach, and then goes into our GI tract. If our GI tract is healthy, the body can it breaks down the food, and it decides what needs to actually go through the mucosal lining into the bloodstream. And it won't allow anything to go through that shouldn't. But with leaky gut syndrome, what happens is if there's a lot of inflammation in the gut, it compromises the mucosal lining. And so things can actually get into the bloodstream that's not supposed to get there. This is becoming more and more common, but it's just really hard to test. But there are actually 3 or 4 tests that can be done to diagnose leaky gut syndrome. But what are some things that you might see with your client base, or what could lead to it, is poor diet, which 60% of the United States is overweight or obese, so that could lead to a lot of issues. You got extreme stress. You got medications can create inflammation in the gut. And if someone, again, bacteria or viral infections, or just to name a few, there are other things that can compromise gut integrity, but understand that those are just some things to look for. Now, what are your signs are, again, weight resistance. A lot of times this comes down to it's difficult losing fat. It's difficult losing weight. And they could also become very tired. Sometimes, though, things could happen where their joints hurt more, they have more nerve issues. If they have an autoimmune disease already, it's kind of setting it on fire, it's starting to get off balance, it's getting out of control. So eczema, things like that are things to look for with your client base. Next is thyroid function. Thyroid actually impacts our metabolism. For every cell in the body, we need thyroid hormone to help regulate our metabolism. So I will tell you the key phrases on this to listen for, whether they're an athlete or a non-athlete, is I really struggle losing weight. I feel like I have to work 10 times harder than anybody else to get the outcome. That is not, take that seriously, because they're confiding in you, they're paying you for your time. They're not, being forced to see you. So don't look at that as they're not doing what they're not supposed to do. This is somebody who really takes the point seriously, but they find that everybody else can have a great outcome, and they're somebody that has to do everything 100% just to have some outcome. So that's the biggest thing on the thyroid aspect. You got metabolic syndrome, which again, 1 out of 5 Americans have metabolic syndrome. It is one of the main things on the sheet that we have a lot of, an area we can help a lot with, but it's a collective of risk factors that if they have a lot of these risk factors they are at increase of high blood pressure, increase of cholesterol and high triglycerides, and their blood sugar. So our standard ones, blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar. So 1 out of 5 Americans have these issues, are going towards these problems. And so the biggest things that you look for is waist circumference. So if your population is a lot of males, just understand males tend to hold their body weight, most of them, between neck and waist. So if they're carrying 30 pounds of extra fat, and I brought my nice little models, so this is a pound of fat, okay? So when you lose a pound of fat, when some people go, I only lost a pound, I go, well, that's a lot of fat. But your guys, you know, because genetically they're predispositioned to put most of their fat on between neck and waist, you can see how that's going to affect their waist circumference. So, and then I always tease, but no wonder why people don't sleep well if they keep gaining more fat, especially between neck and waist, because you lay down and then all of a sudden, you know, all this fat is spread out, and then you lay down and then it's like, ooh, let's just suffocate ourselves. And our skin doesn't stretch out to accommodate all the fat. It just kind of like, now we're just we're a donut and we're just holding all this fat, and then we're like, why can't I breathe well or sleep well? Because, you know, we have a lot of this, we have a lot of fat. So metabolic syndrome basically has those key factors which are up there, but the biggest things for you is waist measurement, and it's not up there, but body composition. And we'll talk about that. If you have a tendency to work with athletes that are football athletes, please understand that the average American football player in the United States in the collegiate level, 20 to 25% already have metabolic syndrome by their freshman year in college. Which means when you're working with them when they're 13, 14, 15, 16, they are on their way to metabolic syndrome already. And so I highly recommend if you're working with anybody, it doesn't have to be a football player, they're just big early, and you can tell by looking at them, they're not the leanest, but they can carry the weight well, that it really is worth getting blood work and really checking that out in body composition, because we really can change their lives for the better. Next is, which is pretty encompassing, and it could be a whole topic in itself, is current nutrition intake and which direction do you go. I can tell you, I customize. Whoever comes into my office, we do a lot of testing first, and then ask a lot of questions, and then we decide which direction we should go, depending on the goals that they came in for. But I just want to challenge you on this is please know what they're currently even doing. If you're going to have the biggest impact on your people's outcome is we tend to eat the same 30 foods over again and again and again. And I bet if you just asked yourself what you ate day in and day out, most people eat the same breakfast, they eat the same lunch, they eat the same snacks, and dinner is what varies. Now, there are a few people out there that love variety, but you know what variety is? It's expensive. It's time consuming. So I do like my athletes and people to get variety, but sometimes I'm saying like, hey, if you can just change one thing a week with your breakfast or one thing a week with your lunch. So let's just pretend they're doing eggs for breakfast, and then I say, oh, well, can you put in 1 ounce of turkey with your 2 eggs instead of 3 eggs, or can you do, you know, 1 ounce of lean ham with your eggs instead of that, or can you do potatoes instead of sweet potatoes, or can you do brown rice? You know, just, or if you do a salad, can you make some of it out of spinach this week and next week out of arugula? I mean, so at least you're they're still sticking with what feels comfortable to them, but they're still, you guys, we would never ask somebody to do the same exercise program day in and day out and expect a great return. So we can't expect for us to eat the same exact thing day in and day out and not our body to become accustomed to that. So, but those are quick ways to change that. 95% of diets fail, So if we go into a really controlled way of taking somebody, it's just like, where are they coming from? The reality is 75% of my athletes do not eat enough. Second is that the average American only consumes one whole fruit or vegetable a day before they come to see you, most of them. And the average person really should be consuming 1 or 2 cups of fruit a day, of whole fruit. And so is that a cup of berries? Is that a grapefruit? Is that a grapefruit and a cup of berries? But you know, I always find it very fascinating on the fruit front, because some people, it's like fruit is death. And I just go, well, I've never had someone come to me and say, I had a really bad weekend and I broke down and I ate a whole bag of clementines this weekend. Or I ate 6 bananas. I know it was bad because they're so high in fructose. It's not, that is fruit, for most people, are not the issue. It's the beer, it's the fried foods, it's the comfort foods, it's the yumminess, it's a donut. You know, so when we put it in perspective of 1 or 2 whole servings of fruit, or 2 to 4, I think it's a pretty good direction to go. Or how many people are consuming, literally in an adult life, 7 to 9 servings of non-starchy veggies a day? That 2/3 of their plate should be non-starchy veggies. The average American, it might be 1 and maybe 2. So, you know, just to put that in perspective of portion size, a 1/2 cup cooked, which is a diameter of a tennis ball, or 2 cups for raw, okay? So the average American consumes only 10 to 12 grams of fiber a day, and we really need 25 to 40 grams of fiber a day. Alzheimer's can be slowed down if we get enough fruits and vegetables in. That's a pretty powerful statement when you know somebody who might have Alzheimer's. It's not saying it's going to stop it, but it can slow it down because of our fruit and non-starchy vegetable consumption. So when you look at all of those factors, just please know where they start and where maybe you should take them. Now, obviously there's other factors: activity level, habits, hydration, their schedule, sleep, okay, stress. So are you asking your client, on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me what's your minimum amount of stress at work and what's your maximum amount of stress at work? 10 is being high. If anybody is constantly at a 7 or higher, that's going to be a problem. And that might be what you need to work with them, because if they can't find healthier ways to manage their stress, then how are you going to help them calm their gut down, not create inflammation, maybe have poor sleep, and make nutrition choices on the fly? What if they don't sleep well? You know that you can actually, my dad did this, you can order a sleep test online for free. If you want to know if you have sleep apnea or if you have problems sleeping, you can actually test it for free at your house. And you get it, you put it on, you send it, and then they'll tell you your outcome. So there's not even an excuse to not to check sleep because it's free. And so for him, it was really nice. I should have known, you know, sometimes I'm oblivious to my own family members, because he would snore since I was little. Like, it was so loud, it would wake us up. And never in all my years would think he had sleep apnea. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wanted to hit my head up against the wall. Like, oh my God, my dad has sleep apnea. Why didn't I know that? And he did. He was waking up 62 times in the middle of the night for almost his whole life. So, and now he has the sleep and the machine that fits him right, and he just went into a doctor's office located close to him, and they fit him, and then now it's down to 6 times a night that he wakes up in the middle of every, you know, that was, I'm sorry, 62 times. I shouldn't say in a night, in a minute. It was really crazy, because I could see why. So you guys, sometimes we can do everything we can from the fitness aspect, but what else is interfering with the outcome that they're coming to see you with? Because if you don't get good sleep, I don't know about you, but I'm not functioning very well the next day. So, and then guess what? We start to use other tactics to help us. So just to finalize on this is these are tons of variables that can affect nutrition outcomes. So we're going to move on to the second one, which are the tests that I think that a lot of us should use to help validify where we should go. For most of us in the room, I think body composition is huge. I actually, if you don't know what that is, on the upper left-hand corner, that's a bod pod. I have one at my office. I've used it for over 15 years. I still love it. It works great. It can fit up to 500 pounds, and it's just air. But the other two that are really well known is DEXA. So that's known for bone density. But if you have any exercise phys labs somewhere in your area, they have a DEXA machine. And hopefully they open it up to the public. And then you have underwater weighing, which it's harder and harder to find. Now, InBody is a high-end bioimpedance device. And again, if I prefer the 3 first, but if that's what you have at your disposal, great. Just be consistent with how you measure body composition. And then if you don't have any of those, or you live in an area that you just don't have access to those, then one of the brands that I like is Tanita Scale, the Ironman one, because I find I only have 10 people to compare this to, but I've had 10 people with the Ironman scale. That tells you percent hydration, that it's about 3% within my bod pod testing. So if my bod pod had them at 15, their Tanita would have them at 12. Okay, so bioimpedance tends to go on the lower end than my bod pod. Now, why do I think this is important? Because how in the world are you going to know where they need to go with the fitness and health level? Here's the thing. So when I have them come in, we do a body comp, and this is your pound of fat, and this is your pound of muscle. So you can't, I don't know about you, I don't have X-ray eyes that's going to tell me this person has so much lean to so much fat. And I've done over 10,000 bod pods, so I've actually set my own parameters on where people should be for what height and how much lean weight that they should have. Now, the biggest fault that I find that people use body composition in the wrong way is please do not just look at percent fat. If you are somebody that says, oh, you're this percent fat, and that's all you look at, you are not helping your client base at all. Because I can have somebody that's 10 pounds underweight, and they could be, 18% body fat, but they don't have enough muscle to help them out. So the goal is how much lean weight to fat weight do they have? And then how are you going to change their goals around that? So if they say they want to weigh 120, you're going to say, I'm sorry, but you would be 5% if it was a female. You'd be 5% body fat if you weighed 120. So, or it's the other direction. I had a 12-year-old girl who's been vegan her whole life, and she's 5'4". She weighs 136, so body mass index would have her at 120. So honestly, not anything alarming there. You know what her body fat was? 40%. Say that louder, yeah. So here's the thing, you wouldn't look at her and say you're 40% body fat, but her lean weight was only 77 pounds of lean weight. And again, I'm not a scientist. I just do thousands of clients a year in body compositions where people who are vegan, Indian descent, Chinese descent, where they really follow being vegetarian, there is nothing wrong with that. But they have a tendency to have a low amount of lean weight. So they are lower weight with lower amount of lean weight. So when they put on 10 or 20 pounds, they actually have high blood pressure, heart disease, and going into type 2 diabetes, because I've seen them. There is something to be said about knowing where the lean weight is. So if you were working with that individual, guess what I was telling her? You need to start strength training. And we need to get your nutrient timing on protein better, because obviously she was eating almost all carbs. And so we were trying to get the thing spread out. I've had a heptathlete. She was 5'6". She weighed 150 pounds. Okay. Every coach that she's had, she went to the Olympics twice, and every coach she worked with, no matter where they at, wanted her to lose weight. This girl is 9% body fat. So imagine a female that's 5'6", weighs 150 at 9% body fat with a normal menstrual cycle. And all the coaches want her to lose weight. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with body fat. This has to do with all this muscle. And you better decide how you're gonna train that, because she responds too well. She has a lot of lean weight, so you decide if you're gonna train her differently. Because I've seen her for 5 years and I've never had a bod pod. It always is around 9 to 10%. So how are you gonna train that individual? So it can go for all ages. Now, the rule of thumb with body composition, because most of my people work with non-athletes, is the average person after age 30 can lose up to 2 pounds of muscle a year if they don't do something to maintain it. Running does not maintain muscle mass. Walking does not maintain muscle mass. So I'm not saying all of a sudden you're gonna make them be up. They always fear like the bodybuilder thing, the long distance. It's like you're not gonna become huge. You need to do body weight, TRX, bands, something that at least you're going to maintain your lean weight. And I can tell you at Tufts University many, many years ago, they have already proven you can gain muscle back, and you can gain muscle at 100 years old as long as you don't have a muscle wasting disease. So muscle is different. If you lose it, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. And I really don't like people say, well, I'm older, so you're automatically going to lose muscle. I'm like, I work with way too many people that defy that number and that statistic. It's a choice for most people that they're not eating the right things at the right times, and especially they're not lifting or doing some type of resistance to maintain the lean weight. So if you're working with somebody, I want every year when I see them that they at least maintain the amount of lean weight that they have. If you're directing somebody in a certain nutrition direction, you better check their body composition. Because I've seen some really unique things in my office of people who have done bod pods before, and then they're coming back to do bod pods after. And so I challenge you that you better make sure you track body composition with a lot of this stuff. So for instance, because keto is so popular, I had somebody who had done a bod pod 2 years prior. He has been doing, like 2 years prior, he did a bod pod. He came in just last month, and he had been doing keto for a solid, 24 months. He has the breathing mask. He knows he's in ketosis. He's hardly gotten out of it. But the thing when we did the bod pod was, and this is 2 years later, he was down 20 pounds, but 10 was lean weight. And so I'm not getting it. You need to use science to back up where you're going to take somebody. And I also have hydration strips. So I had him pee on the strip to see if he was hydrating, and he was hydrated. So this 10 pounds is not water weight, okay? So I just want you to be aware that use science to direct where you're going to go, and it's not just for 4 weeks, it's not just for 3 months. You gotta take it as far as that individual is going to go with it to see how well it's gonna affect their health. I also use body composition to dictate the minimum amount of protein that I'm going to recommend. Now, for you guys, it's 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, but here's the thing, I'm not gonna feed fat. So I'm not always gonna, the lean weight is the minimum amount of protein I'm gonna recommend to somebody. For instance, I had a 400-pound football player. I'm not kidding, 400-pound football player. He can fit in my bod pod. And somebody told him he needed a gram per pound of weight. So he's eating 400 grams of protein a day, because that's what the science says. He is 45% body fat. I am not gonna feed this guy 400 grams of protein. But this is where not knowing where somebody is, how much lean weight they actually have, and how much little they have, where do you need to go with these numbers? So I even use it to customize that. Now, metabolism. I actually measure metabolism. If you have the opportunity to refer and have metabolism testing done, I highly recommend it. because these calculations have been around for eons. Apple Watches, Fitbits, Garmin's, MyFitnessPal, they do not all have someone smart in their office coming up with their own total energy equation. They use Harris Benedict or something other, and you put your height, weight, and age, and that's where they start you. I've had people burn less than what's estimated. I've had people burn more than what's estimated. Now, here's the scary part, folks. There is actually a gene that some of us have that burns up to 450 to 650 calories less than what's estimated. And I claim I have that gene, all right? Has nothing to do with any ailment, that they actually are not blessed to have a gene that says they're gonna burn 450 to 650 calories less than average. So here's the thing. Please, if you're working with the athlete population in young groups, 75% chronically undereat. And again, if you can refer out and get metabolism testing, it really helps, because if someone's metabolism is lower than what I think, it's due to two things. They're not eating enough. So I hope you know that. If you don't eat enough, you output so much and you input so much, and that gap is too big, and you do it for too long. The body just says, I try to explain it to people like this. Internally, the body has no eyeballs and no ears to this world. It just goes, oh my gosh, what are they doing? Just like our last speaker. Okay, we're climbing over something. We're going through mud. All I know, my heart rate's up, and we're doing this for eons. Are you going to catch fish anytime soon? Because I'm starving. And you keep doing this day in and day out. I don't think I'm going to survive the winter. It doesn't know you have Starbucks. It doesn't know you have money in its pocket. It just goes, it's going totally blind about what's going on. It's just going on what's genetically and physiologically going on in your body. And so you're forcing it to make a decision to say, you're not giving me enough fuel, so I am going to hold on to fat, and I am going to let you burn some muscle, and I'm going to bring your metabolism down. So low metabolism can also be that they derived it on their own, and you can get out of that. But you guys, that's help. You need someone to help with that. And two is it medical? So when I see these numbers, it's like one or two things, and I kind of have a better idea once I've done my assessment. I have lots of people just refer for my body comp and my metabolism, my other things, and then they just turn right around and they give the data and they go right back to them. And I totally respect that. That's great. That's what I'm there for, is to help you assess what you're going to do with your client base. But please, another example on metabolism is I had a lady who was 60 years old. She had 50 pounds to lose, but she also had tons of lean weight, and she was 5'2". She would work out 5 to 7 hours a week. And everywhere she went, they put her on a 1,200 calorie diet. You want to know why? Because she's 60 years old, she's 5'2". So here's the thing, if you're active, the equations they automatically discriminate against age. They say you're older, so you're going to burn less. Because supposedly you're going to lose 1 or 2 pounds of muscle a year if you don't do something to maintain that. She was burning 1,800 calories at rest. That's what metabolism is. How many calories do you burn if you just sleep 24 hours a day? She was burning 1,800 calories at rest. And they kept putting her on a 1,200 calorie diet because they can't deviate. Because that's the law. That's why if you ever wonder how Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and Nutrisystem, they have a dietitian and corporate office, everything is written down and you cannot deviate. So they're like, well, you have to eat 1,200, and here she is starving to death and she can never keep up with it. And I'm like, you actually need a minimum of 1,800 calories a day. And I just saw her, she came back for a bod pod, now she's 65. Oh my gosh, she's gained 2 more pounds of lean weight, and she's 65, has even more lean weight, burning an extra 100. Now she's up to 1,900 calories at rest. So she's defying everything, and she has lost 30 pounds. So let's lose the right weight. Next, which I'm really excited back to share with you, is metabolic efficiency testing. Bob Seebehor out of Colorado has perfected this technique. He's been working on it for over 10 years, and now there's people with metabolic efficiency training. I'm actually one of those people. You can actually test to see where you're currently at and how effective you're burning fat. So if you want to really get down and dirty about where you're at or where your client base is at, here's the thing. I personally can't do the test. That's level 2, but you need a metabolic cart. So a metabolic cart's a minimum $20,000 drop in the bucket. So the thing is you have to have a metabolic cart to be able to do this. This is not a VO2 max test. This is a VO2 test, or this is a metabolic efficiency training test. It takes 20 to 30 minutes or 60 minutes on the treadmill. If you're somebody who does bike and run, you would do one on the bike and you would do one on the run. And then you can see this is somebody where their efficiency point was more in the middle to the left, and you really want it to move towards the right. So it's 80% nutrition and 20% changes with exercise. So you can see exactly with your changes if it's working for you. The other thing that's really neat about this is that if I have people who are doing long distance sports, if they do, it's a little bit of a different training protocol on the metabolism, the metabolic cart, but we can actually now get to how many grams of carbs they need per hour on the bike and how many grams of carbs that they need on the run. That's how specific this testing can get. So it's really awesome, but they should do it 3 to 4 weeks out. And again, Bob Seebehor, he has a book on metabolic. It's an ebook, and it's in its second edition, so it's worth a read. Next is Muscle Sound. We actually have this device. We've used it for 8 months now. It's been out for almost 10 years. It actually tests how much glycogen is in the muscle, and we do it by ultrasound. You test right and left quad. I kid you not, it takes 5 minutes to do the test. It goes to a cloud, and we get the results within a minute. Our goal is to store carbs and burn fat. Now, because I work with a lot of athletes, wow, you'd be surprised how many people have less than 20% of carbohydrates in their muscle. So the right quad is indicative of the right side. The left quad is indicative of the left side. So no wonder why they're getting tired and fatigued and soreness and not feeling well. And so our goal is to store carbs and burn fat. This also measures symmetry. So if I get people who have a left quad versus a right quad that's not the same size, then I will make sure that that goes back to their coach or whoever they're working with. If they're not, then we need to kind of look at some individualized stuff there. And from an injury rate, this is really cool because I didn't know how much injuries impact how you absorb carbs in the muscle. But so, for instance, I had an Ironman person come in, and his right side was at 70%, and his left side was at 20%. And I was like, all of a sudden, I said, do you have any injuries? What's going on? Because to have a 50% difference from left to right side, I was like, whoa. And he's like, my knee is killing me. Now, this guy's only 28. And he's training for an Ironman. And I said, you need to stop. You need to stop running. You need to just swim. You need to do something with your training because this is so inflamed. It's impacting how you absorb carbs in your muscle. We did a sodium chloride test too to see how much sodium chloride he was losing per pound of sweat. He's like, well, I really can't stop. And I'm also an athletic trainer. So I was like, well, I highly recommend that you do something differently, but okay. And 10 days later, I call him with the sodium chloride results, and I said, how are things going? And he goes, I tore my patella tendon. I said, okay, well, maybe I should have pushed that. I was feeling a little guilty because I thought maybe I should have pushed him a little bit harder on maybe slowing down. And so guess what? He's really done. You're talking surgery, rehab. Good luck with that. It's going to be a good year before he might get going again. And I don't know at what level. So it's neat in that aspect that we can see things from an inflammatory process. Lab work, lipids, inflammation markers, you guys, the list goes on and on. I can tell you just in general, I like most people to cover vitamin D, I like B12, I like ferritin, I like folate, maybe zinc, and I love to track testosterone because believe it or not, if that goes down, it will affect outcomes on lean weight. So finishing off, we've done two components so far. We've done the variables of nutrition outcomes and now the variety of tests, and now we're going to move on to the supplementation. Are we down to 10 minutes? Okay, thank you. So deficiencies are obviously, we don't want to have a calcium and magnesium deficiency because we don't want stress fractures, osteoporosis, osteopenia. If you work with a younger population, understand that you can only gain bone up until age 25 or 30, so this is really important that we're getting the levels that you need. Iron, believe it or not, some people, 25% of male and females have normal iron levels on their panels, but they have low ferritin. Ferritin is stored iron, okay? So just because you're male does not mean you can't have low ferritin. You will feel like crap. This is where they're trying to figure it out. They're exhausted, they're tired, or they're not recovering well from hard workouts, but they get their iron tested and everything looks fine. But 25% have low ferritin and they will feel awful. You guys, iron is a turtle. It crawls up and it crawls down. It is not a fast fix. This is why tracking it yearly is good. Vitamins and minerals, especially vitamin C and vitamin E. Vitamin C, roughly at least 45 to 90 milligrams a day. Vitamin E, 30, but research is showing 200 to 400 IUs. If you're going to get 200 IUs of vitamin E a day, you need to do a cup of oil or 16 pounds of spinach a day to get that. So usually vitamin E in alpha tocopherol form is the best to get that. And vitamin C, obviously, if somebody eats just a little bit of fruits and vegetables, they can easily get high levels of vitamin C. But if you exceed 2,000 milligrams a day, you're likely going to have GI distress. You guys, I put all these in your things in the handouts online, but I knew I wouldn't have time to cover them, but I just left them in there for your own knowledge. Next is we have supplementation for performance. Now, I know that some of this is old school with new school. So caffeine, I can't tell you, we all know for those who love caffeine, it definitely makes you feel good. Okay, if you feel good, it's easier to have a great workout. It also helps with physical performance. The rule of thumb is 2 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, 45 to 60 minutes prior. For people who are under 18, I would caution and tiptoe with this subject because there is actually a gene that says you should not go over 200 milligrams of caffeine a day. So some people already know they have a sensitivity, but kids that are 16 years old don't really probably comprehend if they have a sensitivity to caffeine. So, and obviously it's a drug set. Creatine has been around forever, monohydrate 2 to 5 grams a day. Usually if we use this, nutrition always comes first. If nutrition is not where it needs to be, I don't even talk about supplements. You guys, if they're eating fried foods and not eating enough calories, where do you think you're really gonna go with supplementing with creatine? Ooh, you lift hard. Ooh, you hold some water. Ooh. Okay, well, you're 1,000 calories less than what you need and your protein timing is off and you ate 50% saturated fat. I don't know if you're really gonna get to your goals with that. It's kind of a waste of money, all right? And they also wonder too, because it lasts for a week or two, they buy protein powder and they buy creatine because they think they're gonna get large muscles. And then they realize in 2 weeks that nothing is happening because protein powder is only 120 calories. Okay, and if anybody is putting on large amounts of weight in a short amount of time and their dietary changes have not changed, then we know that if they got drug tested, it'd probably be a positive result. Dietary nitrate is beet juice. It does work. It helps with blood flow and it helps with decrease of oxygen consumption during workloads. The common intake is 0.5 liters of beet juice, or approximately 5 millimoles, 2.5 hours before the activity. Don't do any antibacterial mouthwash or chewing gum because it can actually interfere with the conversion of the nitrate to nitrite. Beta-alanine is very effective. It improves high-intensity workouts. It helps with intercellular buffer to hydrogen ions. It helps with lactic acid. all right? But you have to be really knowledgeable on this because it does take at least 4 weeks to get to maximum capacity to help with this process. If you look at the dosage, there's different means. If I saw on the GNC, they had their beta alanine sitting on the table with 6 grams, but it's usually 3 grams, 3 to 6 grams, 3 to 4 weeks, followed by 1.2. Please understand, usually I do that when I know they're heading into major training and major performance, and then it takes 10 to 20 weeks before their body gets back to baseline. Now, bicarbonate does the same thing. It helps with intracellular buffers, but you need 0.3 to 0.4 grams of sodium bicarbonate 60 to 90 minutes prior. It can actually help with team sports. You got glutamine, which is 5 to 10 grams a day. Definitely if somebody's cutting weight, muscle breakdown, lots of illness, immune system. A lot of my naturopaths like to use glutamine for gut health. Fish oils, 5 to 1,000 each of EPA and DHA a day. That's a good fish oil, okay? So you gotta look at EPA and DHA. You want 500 to 1,000 milligrams of each to help with inflammation. Tart cherry juice, it definitely helps with muscle damage and pain. Again, I only use this when I know somebody might be doing a lot of training and they're a high-end athlete. It might help with sleep, 12 ounces 2 times a day, 7 days prior, but guess what? I work with a lot of swimmers. We have three Olympic hopefuls in my area that I'm working with. And so they do 2 weeks of holiday training, which is insane. So it's something that we do through that time frame, okay? Or if they have major swimming events. Leucine actually turns on protein synthesis. So understand you really need 2.5 to 3.5 grams spread throughout. Your meat has that, your dairy has that, your soy has that. Pea protein, be careful. The only one that I know, I'm not saying it's the only one, but Garden of Life, their protein powder and their bars have 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine in their protein. But not all protein powders are the same, and we got a lot of people doing vegan. So if you're gonna make sure, you make sure that when they get that scoop, it has 2.5 to 3.5 grams of leucine because that helps turn on protein synthesis. Gut health, there's tons of stuff. If I have somebody who's definitely if they're taking antibiotics, I'm gonna have them do 50 billion IUs or 50 billion colonies of a variety of probiotics during that time. We got recovery, which if they already have a stress fracture, you guys, I don't know if you know this, but there is some nice research coming out that actually protein helps with bone collagen synthesis. So getting enough protein, I can tell you that most people still with all this protein phase does not get enough protein timed throughout the day, especially my younger ones with calcium, magnesium, and vitamin K. Greens. Vitamin K is another things, but greens are very helpful to help also with alkaline. Concussions, huge. There is actually a gene that can test if you are somebody who is more susceptible, not susceptible, if you get a concussion, that you will struggle more in recovery. So there's new research on fish oil, but here's the thing, it's all DHA, it's not EPA. So if somebody has a concussion, literally within the day of to 30 to 60 days after, they're going 1,000 to 5,000 milligrams. There's one doctor out there, Dr. Sears, who literally did 20 grams of fish oil, of DHA within 48 hours of a concussion, but obviously I'm not gonna prescribe that. Oh, yeah, that's a doctor. But here's the thing with fish oil, it shows that it reduces serum neurofilament light, which is a biomarker for brain injury. So it actually shows reduction. So turmeric helps as a anti-inflammatory and crosses the brain barrier. And last, we'll follow up with tendons and ligaments, which Kevin Barr, B-A-R, in the last 5 years, his research is phenomenal on tendons and ligaments. We actually have a gene that will tell us if we're more prone to an Achilles tendon tear. Again, if I have an athlete, we're like doing this protocol. We're doing prevention. But you can actually strengthen tendons and ligaments, okay? So if they've already done a tear, we want a tablespoon of gelatin and 500 milligrams of vitamin C about 30 to 60 minutes prior to their rehab. Now, if I have someone that I know that has the gene, maybe they're a really high-level athlete, maybe I'd say, hey, here's another protocol. Let's say they have basketball practice in the evening. They might get up, they do their gelatin and vitamin C, they jump rope for 6 to 8 minutes, and then 6 hours or longer later, they do their afternoon workout. You can flip-flop that. So if their afternoon workout is in the morning, then you do that protocol in the evening. It actually is working. So this is good research to follow because the protocols and things that they're finding will probably grow or change. So to finish off, you guys, because I'm almost at the end, and questions I'll have to probably take outside or take one question, is if we recap, we've covered the variables that affect our nutrition outcomes. 2 is we covered the tests that can help us decide which direction we should go with our client base. And 3rd, our supplementation on deficiencies, recovery, and performance. You guys, thanks for attending and your attention to this matter.